Hello everybody and welcome to SHOT Show TV. I'm Larry Keane from the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and I'm joined with a bunch of my good friends, and we're going to talk about the Hearing Protection Act. So joining me is Frank Miniter from Forbes magazine, Ryan Cleckner, best-selling author and the firearms attorney and Rocket FFL, and a former NSSF employee, and AWR Hawkins from Breitbart News. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Hearing Protection Act, which I'm sure you're all wanting to know what's happening, when is it going to pass, when can I get my suppressor without having to pay a $200 tax. So Frank, why don't you just sort of sum up where we are and things?
Yeah, well, let me start in a different spot, because
Sure.
when this first grabbed me about 10 years ago, I was hunting in Finland. And I was with the NRA at the time, working on an article in Finland, and all the guys came out to show me their deer rifles. They had a bunch of Sockos in all the 308, and they all were suppressed. And I just thought that was so cool. And I looked at it, and they said, well, you don't have suppressors on your rifles? How impolite in the United States of America. Do you run around in cars without mufflers on them? Is that what you do? And I'm like, well, no, and you're right. That's a polite thing to do.
Yeah.
And so if the EU can get this right, why can't the United States of America?
That's true.
So
That's true. Well, there are a lot of misnomers about what they are, and they for a lot of reasons, or have this mystique about them that's associated with gangsters and crime, and it's just, as you mentioned, it's just not true. And in many parts of Europe, they're mandatory. They're not regulated. In very high gun control places like London, you can walk into a hardware store and buy one for 25 bucks. So I think it's very important, and one of the things we have to do to move the legislation is to educate not just the people on the Hill, but the public, and even many gun owners, about what suppressors are and what they're not and what they actually do. And I know, in your prior life in the military, you actually use them, and you know quite a bit about suppressors from working at Remington. Can you just explain for the viewers what suppressors actually do and what they don't do?
Sure. So there's two main noises to every gun when it fires. I shouldn't say every gun. If it's supersonic bullets, there's two noises. Is you have the rapidly expanding gases from the explosion to send the bullet out of the barrel. And then with rifles, you have a supersonic crack. That bullet is breaking the sound barrier as it flies through the air. Well, a silencer, much like a muffler on a car, is just an expansion chamber with a series of baffles. I mean, really, just like a muffler. Here, Maxim, who patented the silencer in the same exact year, patented the automobile muffler.
Right.
Like, same guy, same design. All it does is it helps quiet the expanding gases as they come out of the rifle. It does nothing to stop the supersonic crack, and it doesn't make it completely silent like Hollywood does at all. Matter of fact, many firearms with silencers aren't even hearing safe. You still need to wear ear protection.
Right. So we there's legislation pending in the House by Congressman Jeff Duncan as a standalone bill, and then it was added to the Sportsman's Package, the SHARE Act, but it hasn't gotten a vote in the House. And then in the Senate, Senator Crapo has introduced legislation as well, and it also hasn't moved, unfortunately. And what we're hearing from the Hill is that the votes just aren't there, either in the House or in the Senate, to move the legislation. So we've got a lot of educating to do, and we need to get the word out to gun owners and to the public about the benefits of suppressors. You know, they can make it easier to train people. But AWR, talk a little bit about what you're trying to do to communicate the information to people on Breitbart News.
Well, we're trying to do basically what you say, to educate. You know, you have people like Gabby Giffords and her gun group. They'll make a claim, they'll say, oh no, suppressors don't protect your hearing, they're not better than earmuffs. And in the same tweet, the very same tweet, she'll say, uh-oh, suppressors make guns so quiet that police can't detect them. And so they're desperate because they know the truth is, guess what? A suppressor is, as Frank indicated, it's just a muffler. And it makes the sound manageable, it doesn't wipe it out. And we try to get that across to people. We make some videos, just simple videos, where I'll use one of my suppressors, I'll put it on a 9 or a 5.56. We'll shoot it on, we'll shoot it off. They hear it both times. And as Ryan said, I still need, with some of those rounds, I still need some hearing protection on top of the suppressor, but it makes the sound manageable. And you cannot ignore the hearing benefits from that. You just really can't. They want to think we make it up. They want to act like we make it up. But you know we don't, I know we don't. It really does benefit the guy who's going to shoot every hunting season for the rest of his life. And that's what we try to tell people.
Well, I get asked all the time, when is the bill going to pass? When is the bill going to pass? And you know, the honest truth is that passing major legislation through Congress. It can take 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions of Congress. It can take 6, 8, 10 years to move major legislation. Look at how long we've been working on national reciprocity. We're getting close, but we still have work to do. And it's really the same thing with the Hearing Protection Act. We're making progress, a lot of work to do in educating, again, the public as well as members of Congress before we can realistically see the legislation passed. And so, we've seen a lot of people just not buying suppressors, thinking that if they just wait a little while, the $200 fee will go away. And I would tell people, don't wait, really, because it's going to take a long time. And so you really want to have a suppressor for hunting or for target shooting. It really makes shooting much more enjoyable. Don't wait. I mean, really, don't wait. Go out there. The wait times, we're trying to work with ATF to get those down. And they're starting to come down a little bit. But, and I commend ATF. They're really trying to reduce the wait log or the waiting period as long as possible. I know they'd like to see the Hearing Protection Act passed, because then they can use those resources on other things, because there isn't really a public safety benefit. Ryan, you're an attorney. Talk a little bit about the NFA and what it means to take suppressors out of the NFA and how they're treated by the Gun Control Act.
That's a tough question, because, well, first, the silencers being used in crimes and Gabby Giffords being concerned about that. I don't think it's an issue because it's currently not an issue. Right. Silencers are currently legal to possess in most states, and the only crimes that you ever see silencers involved in are possession-based crimes, which means if we stopped criminalizing the possession, those would all go away. We have so they're clearly not useful in crimes, or else they'd be used. That being said, part of the challenge on getting them out of the National Firearms Act and moving them to the Gun Control Act is every part of a silencer is considered to be a silencer by the ATF. Right. So once that baffle part has decided it's going to be in a silencer, well, it doesn't decide, but once you've made that decision, it needs to be controlled and regulated. And when you jump over to the Gun Control Act, we have definitions for things like firearm, which only the frame or receiver is defined as the firearm. And that's one hurdle I personally think needs to be overcome in the regulations on what part of that silencer we're going to call the silencer. Right. And the rest we're going to deregulate as maybe ITAR-controlled firearms parts. So we're going to have lawyers and gun tech guys arguing and debating over the construct of silencers, let alone the legal maneuvering to get there.
But all that aside, I'm a journalist and I look at this legislation, it's one page. I mean, it's just simply to treat suppressors like we do firearms, so you go through a background check without this big process of having to apply through the ATF for it. It's so simple, there it is, right there. Bang, it's not a complicated idea. What we have to do as journalists is go out there and tell people about these benefits. I mean, my local gun range was almost shut down because of the noise ordinance, because people move up from New York City, I live in New York State, and they complain about the noise when this gun range has been there for a century. We could make it quieter, we could make it more polite if we could just use these. I'm in New York State where I can't get a suppressor.
They're legal to own in 42 states, and so we go to Hill and talk to legislators who are opposed to the legislation, and then we say, they're legal to own in your state. And they don't know, they're not aware. You can hunt with them, and there's 41 states, I believe, you can hunt with them. And as you mentioned, in parts of Europe, they're mandatory. You have to hunt with them, even if it's a rural area like Finland, a very populated country, they're still required. And they just don't have that connotation, unfortunately, that we've seen in the United States. But again, we got a lot of work to do to get it done, and people shouldn't wait to get their suppressors. And don't call them silencers. That's part of the rhetorical challenge, right? I mean, Mr. Maxim did, which is a marketing idea, but they really don't make gun silence. It's a falsehood that you can't hear them. The criminals will be able to commit crimes without being detected. Even the CEO of ShotSpotter, the technology that police are using in some cities to identify shootings, has said that suppressors would not prevent their technology from working, which really takes the legs out from the arguments by Gabby Giffords and the other gun control groups that are opposed to it.
So I'm guilty of calling them silencers, of course, because the law calls them silencers. Yes. So but I got to work on that, because I think the public perception is the problem. I know many gun owners. This kind of goes back to AR-15s when they're getting popular. There are many gun owners that are, yes, I support the Second Amendment, but, and they add that but in there, and they say, what would you need a silencer for, or what they could be used for? That's the hardest challenge. It's not the legislative hurdles. It's getting people, the average gun owner that's never been around a suppressor
Yeah.
and
You know,
fired one.
Something Larry said that is part of education that we do stress at Breitbart, that I'm sure you all stress too. People don't understand they're already legal. So that's another ploy of Gifford's.
Right.
She says this act is going to legalize. No, they're already legal.
They're
We're
legal
just-
and they're
we're
not
just
being
going to remove a
deregulated.
federal
There's still
tax.
be serial numbers,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
still traceable, and there's still a background check
Right.
on the buyer
Right.
and a 4473. So you're just removing a burden, a layer of bureaucracy that does not advance public safety.
Exactly.
Well, thanks guys for joining us on the session of SHOT Show TV. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you around the show. So thanks everybody. And